Dwarves is a deceptive game. To look at it, it looks like a very simple, very lazy, very relaxing, very passive game where you don't really do all that much. I mean, there really are only 3 gameplay mechanics in the game and almost everything is automated. But the exact opposite is actually true. It's intense, hectic, and elaborate in its elegant simplicity. It's not really a game you can fully appreciate just by looking at it. You just have to play it. But that's just as well, because it's well worth playing. You take on the role of the Dwarf Overseer, the chap responsible for the Dwarven mining operation. The field of play is a massive, randomised underground, soil-filled arena that you will dig out in order to expand. You begin with 1 soldier dwarf, 1 digger dwarf, and the headquarters building where those 2 dwarf units are produced. A steady stream of diggers are produced automatically at your headquarters at no cost and without limit, while soldiers have to be paid for and have strict population limits. Your goal is to amass as many points as possible before the clock runs out. Virtually everything you do earns you points. Digging up blocks of dirt and minerals, uncovering caves, building outposts, dealing with disasters like floods, and taking care of enemies. If you can do it, you can probably earn points for doing it. Just about everything is automated, with the idea being that although they will work by themselves, your dwarves are pretty stupid and will require your intervention. Your diggers will happily dig around aimlessly by themselves, which is fine for the most part. You can sit back and let them do their thing, slowly earning you points and money. But to maximise your efficiency, or to hold off the multitude of disasters waiting to bring your game to a swift end, you'll need to take control of them. You do this by drawing arrows on the terrain. Dwarves will go exactly where you tell them to go, and they'll go there at a slightly faster pace than if they are left to their own devices. So this gives you effective micromanagement capability. But drawing these arrows comes at a cost of gold. And therein lies the Dwarven dilemma, and indeed the crux of the entire game. You want to dig as fast and greedily as you can by micromanaging to get as many points as possible within the time limit, but your risk of dying increases exponentially the more you expand. You'll also find that dealing with the hazards and enemies you find in the game environment will seriously tax your economy, and you'll struggle to live within your means. The only way to get a game over is for your headquarters to be destroyed, either by enemies or disasters like floods. If you run out of money, you simply lose the ability to micromanage until you've restored your bank balance. This is cool and plays into the game being designed around doing as much as you can as fast as you can rather than counting coins and balancing books. The field of play is split down into blocks, being either soil, rock, minerals, lava, water, or simply empty. 1 block's worth of arrow costs 5 gold to draw after the first, which costs 10 gold. So drawing an arrow 4 blocks long costs 25 gold. Each block of dirt dug up by a digger, whether he's ordered to do so or not, will yield 1 gold. Clearly this means your dwarves digging of their own accord will make you a slow but steady profit, while dwarves ordered around with arrows will put a serious strain on your economy, until you get to the minerals. Minerals are things like silver, gold, and other lovely shiny things. The veins are spread far and wide, but they're worth a lot of money. The game environments are randomised, but you'll almost always conveniently find that by drawing a long arrow to the nearest vein of minerals to your dwarf, the value of the minerals will exceed the cost of the arrow. This means, to maximise your economy, you'll find yourself ignoring most of your dwarves, leaving them to just dig around, then micromanaging a small number as they branch off in all directions seeking the most valuable minerals found farthest away from your headquarters. This is made easier with a favourite function which allows you to favourite individual dwarves and then easily flick between them, which is very cool. But harkening back to the likes of lemmings, life is dangerous for your poor hapless diggers. Dotted throughout the maps are caves, which you can see are these blackened spots. Caves contain either lava, water, enemies, gold, or nothing at all. Lava and water are dealt with in the same way. You want to drop a wall down to stem the flow, then drop a dynamite which explodes after a digger walks over it, causing a bottomless pit from which nothing can escape, dwarves included. Water moves at a much faster speed than lava, demanding faster reactions, while lava will slowly burn through walls, demanding more tactical control of the situation. And then there's still the issue of your idiot dwarves digging through the dirt to expose the lava or water from other directions. You solve this by dropping undig-throwable rock around the cave, which will seal it off and earn you a whole bunch of points. This is simple enough, but the cost is enormous, and the caves get larger and larger as you get farther from your headquarters, which means even greater cost. You'll often find that you simply can't afford to rock off these caves, and it's absurdly tense to have this death trap sitting just waiting to kill you. This makes dealing with water and lava very stressful, and the moment just before a dwarf digs into a new cave is a truly sphincter-tightening experience. You might also find enemies in the caves. Most enemies are little more than cannon fodder, but you'll also find bosses like shamans and spider queens, who are not only really tough themselves, they're also capable of spawning additional enemies, so you'll need to quickly deal with them unless you want your very own Moria. Your soldiers follow the same rules as your diggers, in as much as they mill around aimlessly while also following arrows, but directing soldiers from your headquarters to the other side of the map is just not practical, which is why you can build outposts. Outposts are the only building you can build in the game, so make no mistake, this is not even a rudimentary city builder or dungeon keeper clone. Outposts serve as auxiliary headquarters, able to produce both diggers and soldiers, but at the outposts you've got to pay to produce diggers, which is done with an on-off toggle rather than them being bought individually. The effectiveness of your soldiers is determined by their level. They level up simply by winning fights, but you can also train them at considerable cost at your outposts. But this is the only practical way to get a cadre of soldiers strong enough to deal with boss enemies. Your soldiers have a large field of vision and will engage any nearby threats without your intervention, and they can even dig through dirt when necessary. But you'll find the best way to move them around is to blast them into combat using cannons attached to your outposts. The cannons make it easy to get soldiers into combat, while a town bell button will recall them without any micromanagement needed, which is very useful. And the UI used to perform these tasks is very simple and easy to understand. The combat is very simple fare. You'll mainly want to outnumber your enemies or place your highest level fighters at the front lines. Enemies take more damage when being attacked from behind, so there is some manoeuvring potential, but it's still very simple stuff, and as with much of the rest of the game, it's automated, so you can just leave them to it if you feel confident of victory. But you do of course have the option to step in and take more direct control if the fight isn't going the way you want it to. But outposts aren't cheap. They cost increasingly more and more the more you have. And what you'll usually find happens is you'll wait until you encounter a boss before desperately dropping an outpost nearby, desperately producing as many soldiers as the outpost can support, and desperately training them up before trying to kill it. And all too often you'll find that you just don't have enough gold to make one right away, and then you'll have to desperately increase your micromanagement to get the extra cash. Desperation is no stranger to plays of Dwarfs. And that's the whole game. Your diggers dig dirt and minerals, your soldiers kill enemies, you draw arrows as needed to guide them around, build outposts, and wall up lava and water. That's the whole game. And it may sound simple, but when you factor in the speed required to get those high scores, you've got APMs that make StarCraft players double take. And it's a lot of fun. It's like juggling one thing too many. You just know that at some point something's got to give, and you've got to choose to put it down before you drop it, while also wanting to keep going as long as possible. And I haven't even gotten to the best bit yet, the S key. The developers will probably tell you it's S for speed, but I think it's S for separates, as in it separates the people with 2 hands from the people with 12. Holding down the S key makes everything run in fast forward speed, but the clock continues to tick down in real time. This means that someone who uses the S key will simply get much more done in the same time period than someone who doesn't use it, and that means more points. Many more points. But everything moves so fast that your chances of survival rapidly approach 0 while using this key. Water can be released before you realise it's even there, and even if you do manage to wall it off, it'll have spread so far that rocking the cave off will cost twice as much as it would have if you had not been using the S key and had walled it off immediately. And it's just brilliant. I don't think my words or even the video can convey the mad panic you feel as you try to expand as fast as you can handle, with the game running at a speed faster than you can possibly respond to it. But that's exactly what you have to do if you want to play the game properly. And that's the thing with this game. I think a lot of people are going to look at it and think, I can build neat little caves and chambers and put buildings in them. Hey, this is Dungeon Keeper! It's not. And if you try to force it to be that game, you'll find it simply lacks the depth to be interesting. This is a game about performing only a few simple tasks, but at extremely high speeds, and, as I said, about trying to juggle as much as you possibly can before it all comes tumbling down. try to make it be something it's not, and you're just not going to enjoy it. But Dwarves does execute its idea very well. That being said, it's not without a few flaws, all relating to its ease of use. My first problem is with the controls. You can move around by moving the mouse to the edge of the screen, or by right-clicking and dragging. While both of these are fine for a slower-paced game, you lose free mouse functionality while moving around like this, which I find slows me down. But if I use the arrow keys to move around, I can't easily access the S key to speed things up, because obviously it's on the other side of the keyboard. I can still click the speed icon on the UI, but that's also taking the mouse out of play. Either way, I feel like my ability to play the game to the fullest of my ability is being restricted by the controls. There's also no easy way to flick between your outposts. You can zoom to the headquarters with the F1 key, but there's no way to move between outposts. This becomes especially frustrating when you're training your soldier dwarves to level them up. This costs an enormous amount of money, and it'll quickly eat away at your cash reserves. But if you set an outpost training, then find yourself called away to deal with something else, finding that outpost again can be very hard, or you might even forget about it and end up spending much more than you actually wanted to. I found this frustrating and think an outpost browser UI or just a disable all training at all outposts button would have been a good addition to the game. I also find it quite awkward keeping track of several events at once. When you encounter a boss, release a hazard like lava, or even if your dwarves dig close by, the game will let you know with a flashing icon and you can jump to it with a click of it. This is great if you only have one or a couple to deal with, but when you have several and you have to make the choice to leave some and prioritise others, finding them again can be awkward. The game gets around this by giving you a slider in the options to have the warning icon stay on the screen for up to 60 seconds, but this is just too much clutter when you've got several to deal with. I think an event browser UI, or again a button to toggle between all active events whether there's an icon on screen or not, would have helped a lot. But these aren't game running flaws, far from it. But they do, to my mind, stand out as fairly obvious issues that do bring the game down a little bit. You can pick your own game length, 5, 15, 30 or 60 minutes. You can also select from 4 difficulty levels whose names perfectly reflect the kind of experience they give. It's great to play a game where you have so much control over your experience with the game, and topping it off is that there's a separate leaderboard for each time and difficulty selection. I found hard 30-minute games to be to my preference, and I'm enjoying competing. I'm not a very competitive person, I don't typically care for score-based games or leaderboard-based games, but something about the way Dwarves implements its scoring system makes me want to compete. I can't point to anything specific, and I don't even normally like this kind of thing, but Dwarves is just messing with my head, man. I just want to keep playing it and improve my score. I've never played a game that integrates its scoring system so well into the gameplay, or that makes me care so much about earning better scores. Everything I've said of the game has been about the main game mode known as Arcade. There's also a fantastic tutorial which includes both a series of learning missions and a thorough codex, including video demonstrations. You'll also find a series of challenges where you're expected to accomplish specific goals based on different aspects of the game. The tutorial and challenges are found under the campaign menu, but calling it a campaign is simply misleading. Anyone expecting any kind of story or sequential progress should look elsewhere. The game doesn't have anything that could be called a campaign by any conventional standards, but I have to stress, the game simply just doesn't need one. There are also a number of other game modes, but as these modes are just rule change variants of the basic game mode, I won't devote any time to them. More noteworthy is the base defense mode, which seems remarkably fleshed out for an extra. Your base is surrounded by a series of portals from which comes first a digger dwarf, followed by a procession of enemies. Your goal is to direct the dwarf to make an elaborate maze, and kit it out with traps not found in the other game modes. But as the maze digging and the weapons are paid for with the same cash pool, you'll find yourself having to find the happy medium, which is an interesting take on the genre. It's more puzzle based than typical defense game modes, and for an extra it's pretty special, but it is just an extra. The frothy head on the Dwarven Ale is the general sense of style and fun. There isn't too much writing in the end, but what there is laugh out loud funny, and anyone who enjoyed the humour and style of Plants vs Zombies will definitely get a kick out of Dwarves, as it's the same kind of thing. The art is simple but vibrant and attractive while zoomed in, and the icons are functional and effective while zoomed out. There are only a couple of music tracks in the game, and while they're short and play on a loop, they're pleasant enough that they don't become annoying. Dwarves is a near perfect execution of a good idea. Despite its apparent simplicity, it takes quite a while for just how to play the game properly to become apparent, but once it does, it's intense, challenging fun, and just like when a house of cards comes tumbling down, when you die in Dwarfs, all you want to do is laugh and try again. It's the kind of game where you can sit and play for hours or just for 5 minutes, but either way it delivers a high quality, fun and challenging experience that I strongly recommend.